So you have to have policies for CCUS deployment itself, and of course you also need policies to deal with the challenges to CCUS deployment. So briefly here, you are going to worry about economic viability. We already mentioned these: lead times, the innovation gap, and project complexity. Let's add a few more details, since CCUS deployment is important, urgent, and will face many challenges. So you need to understand policy tools. Policy categories to address the challenges. In economic viability, you want cost reduction measures, regulation of industrial activities, revenue support. We talked about this already: taxes, incentives, and so on. International collaborations. And so specific policy tools under these can be grants, tax credits, loan support, state-owned enterprises, carbon pricing and leakage policy, public procurement, low emission mandates, carbon contracts for difference, regulated asset base, and emerging market and developing economy considerations. So concessional finance, sustainable debt, and multilateral funding instruments. So I'm repeating some of these points, but it's always worth listening again, since these are really critical. All the big research and suggestions from scientists on adaptation, mitigation, and CCUS, bioenergy, everything we do under the IPCC, for example, have to be mainstreamed into fiscal policies and budget processes and so on. So deployments of any of the adaptation, mitigation, or CCUS, net zero pathways, and so on, all have financial constraints or financial requirements as one of the main barriers or gaps or challenges, and so on. So it's worth reading these. Lead times: enabling legislation and rules will be important to cut the lead time. So we already mentioned one-stop shop for permitting, so the government doesn't have 100 different departments dealing with each piece of the CCUS deployment, that there'll be one place to accelerate the whole process. Clear permit approval timelines, internal regulatory capacity, so that whether with international help or internally, these are set up. World Bank often does this, IMF, and there are many entities which help setting up regulatory capacity. Okay, pre-competitive resource assessment, so that whether it's the private end sector that is participating on project implementation, or whether it's the government that's doing it, effectiveness, efficiency, institutional arrangements, resources, and so on have to be evaluated and be ready when the project starts to go. Everything has to be in place, because oftentimes half-completed projects can just sit there forever. Data sharing and transparency requirements, of course. Community engagement requirements can really be critical to make sure that solutions are co-developed and deployments are co-developed, so that people are not surprised and don't stiffen up and start opposing everything and accept these as solutions that have multiple benefits. The innovation gap: cost reduction measures and international collaboration again. So research, development, and deployment, platforms for international cooperation, foreign direct investment for technology co-development. This can be tricky because not many governments are ready for foreign direct investment in terms of just trust, institutional structure, finance, debt problems, and so on and so forth. Co-development also means having internal expertise that can be trained and led in terms of capacity building for innovation required for CCUS deployment. Project complexity: of course, you need enabling legislation and rules, strategic signaling to players that this is for real and you can stay and make money. Regulations and financial incentives will work for you, and international collaboration again. This is going to be a massive international collaborative effort for developing countries. Long-term storage liability: competitive solicitations for CCUS hubs, one-off backstop agreements for first movers so that early adopters or early investors and early innovators, early service providers and so on are protected in terms of surprises, right? London Protocol specifications, definition of high quality removals, and robust measurement, reporting and verification mechanisms. When I'm done with the next slide, I'll just open the report and read off what London Protocol specification is all about. Okay. Finally, is enhanced oil recovery a good revenue stream for CCUS? It's contradictory, maybe an oxymoron, because if you are doing enhanced oil recovery, that means you are bringing out fossil fuels which are going to be consumed and emissions are going to be put out into the system. But can you use that income? Some of the CO2 utilization can be for pumping out more oil or gas. Then can you put away enough CO2 to more than replace the oil and gas that's coming out and will produce emissions? Or can this work as a revenue stream for CCUS? There is no official public record of CO2 prices paid by oil and gas companies for EOR operations, but a rough benchmark is around $30 per ton of CO2, and the oil price is around $70 per barrel, with two prices closely correlated, so one goes up, other goes up. Such a price is high enough to cover CCUS costs only for limited applications producing very concentrated streams of CO2, so high quality capture happens, such as natural gas processing that we mentioned, ammonia, and some fuels such as bioethanol. However, oil prices are subject to substantial market volatility, with CCUS projects suspending operation because selling CO2 was no longer profitable. Sustainability of the market that we talked about. As an example, operation of the Petronova CCUS plant was suspended in 2020 when CO2 capture ceased to be profitable due to low oil prices. Another example is the Chute Creek CCUS plant. Over its operational lifetime to date, the plant, commissioned in 1986 to capture CO2 during natural gas refining, captured only 34% of its operational capture capacity, so that's around 120 million tons of CO2 cumulatively over this period. The captured CO2 was then mostly vented, about 50%, or sold for enhanced oil recovery, so that was 47%. EOR related revenues alone are not enough for maximizing capture and storage as a public policy goal. CCUS projects should therefore be able to rely on more stable revenue streams that are compatible with net zero goals, supported and or enabled by policies, rather than on revenues from selling oil, which has proven to be a risky revenue stream in the past because of market volatility and because slowly you want to phase out oil anyways. So think of it as having enough fossil fuels to reach safe net zero goals and do EOR to finance CCUS, but always be net negative in the end, so that you don't extract oil by pumping CO2 but produce more CO2 that's not put away, and so on. So let's quickly look at the London thing here, so that I can find by searching in the document London. I'm doing this live, so these PDF files are often searchable or not because Adobe is always tricky. Obligatory under London Protocol 102, page number, where am I? I'm just going to get to it and say what we are talking about when we keep saying London Protocol, right? So here I am in page number, where is it, sir? 78. I hope the table of content page numbers and these match up, because sometimes they don't, right? Sorry about this. This is not the way to do it, but you're okay. we're doing this in an informal way, right? So why is it not working the other way? Navigating PDF files. Adobe is making a lot of money. I have friends who work for it, and they have all these licensing, and licensing is tricky for them for India because it's too expensive in dollar terms, but if they give a rupee price, apparently there are other issues that they have to deal with. So here I am with, come on, 101, 2. Here we are. Obligations under London Protocol. London Protocol status of country receiving CO2 for offshore storage. There is so this is London Protocol status of country capturing for CO2 export versus country receiving CO2 for offshore storage. This is like the landfill example. Remember, states in the US export their garbage to landfills in other states, and there are regulations that you have to deal with. So you have to deal with contracting party, non-contracting party, and on the receiving side you have contracting party and non-contracting party, and there are regulations or protocols that you have to meet. So contracting parties must deposit a declaration of provisional application of the 2009 amendment with the IMO. CPs must establish with the IMOs. CPs must establish an agreement or arrangement that includes confirmation and allocation of permitting responsibilities consistent with the provisions of the protocol and other applications, other applicable international law. Okay, so not governed by the protocol may be subject to United Nations Convention on the law of the sea in terms of countries exporting and receiving CO2 for offshore storage. So you get the idea. That's what the London Protocol is all about. So that concludes this report from IEA on policies and business models for CCUS. Let's leave it here.